start by saying thank you to the organisers. I think it's so important that we've got this Wild Zone up and running this year, and this is going to grow in strength and importance for this festival, because, you know, we for too long have forgotten about how important it is, I think, to engage with younger people, because they're going to have to take the decisions to make this world a better place and learn from some of the mistakes that we've made as adults in terms of protecting wildlife and habitats. Now, today's session, I think, is a real treat for me and for you, because I would say that we've got some of the best wildlife bloggers, writers, film.
And the behaviours of these animals, sort of rather than scary stories about what's going on in the wild. As an education editor, I actually go into schools and I talk to young people, to children, sometimes high school children, often younger children, about these issues. I also get to study wildlife and biodiversity in this country as well as abroad, and communicate with people across the world. So the pieces that we write, like I say, because they're going in different countries, they get translated into different languages as well, and that's really an honour to talk to people across the world. Obviously, a big part of what I do is not just writing about it, it's about research. These are some images of some of the opportunities I've had of going and seeing animals in the wild, and they are animals, like I say, they're wild. These aren't sort of experiences that you get to do as a tourist. Obviously, we know a lot of those are bad, but these are all experiences to do with research, animal care, working with scientists, rehabilitation, and rescue. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to go and do that and to write about it. Something that I consider a major highlight of my career is I actually worked for Discovery Education before I worked for National Geographic. So most people know of the Discovery Channel. And I worked again for the educational side of those that media company. And that was all about, working to educate children in schools. And Racing Extinction was a major wildlife documentary that came out in 2016. And I was fortunate enough to work on a very small team. There was actually 3 of us that packaged this documentary to go into schools, making it manageable for teachers to try and talk about major issues that Racing Extinction covered. And that was everything from wildlife trafficking to talking about endangered species, what's going on with the Asian traditional medicine trade and wildlife trade. And it was just a real honour to be able to do that and talk to 12,000 schools at the time about those kind of issues. So I'm really lucky in my job to be able to talk to wide audiences. As Dom mentioned, I'm also a trustee of Born Free. Born Free is an amazing international charity. They work across the world in so many different areas and with so many different species, and everything from trying to get a full ban on the ivory trade to educating and trying to stop people going and petting cubs on holidays abroad, because that can be a terrible thing that's linked to the canned hunting industry and trophy hunting. And they work on also some amazing projects which are lesser known, things like Ethiopian wolves, which are there's only the only remaining population of Ethiopian wolves. Born Free actually works with to try and conserve them in the wild, to vaccinate dogs, feral dogs in the area, which can spread rabies and the diseases. And they just do amazing work across the globe. And like I say, I'm fortunate enough to work on the board. I'm a trustee. So what the role of a trustee is to help with decision making, helping with deciding which campaigns we're prioritising at what particular time, working on a 5-year plan for the direction of the charity, how it uses its budget, and any upcoming appeals we're working on. So it really gives a wide scope of insight into what the charity does. And then in my spare time, I am a blogger. It's not a lot of spare time, but you have to make it. I keep an award-winning blog, which is Caitlin Conservation, which is actually aimed at slightly older people. My main audience is sort of 25 to 35, so I get to kind of explore some of the issues which I don't do at National Geographic Kids, which is more like things like the badger cull, ivory trade, reducing plastic waste, and some of those perhaps more intense things that we have to react to immediately. And I can perhaps delve into more of the political side and things like that on my blog. And I campaign. That's a huge part of what I do, is going out on marches. The last sort of 5 or 6 years, I've gone to many different marches. Some of the things I mentioned there were sort of to do with lions, fox hunting, obviously trying to stop fox hunting and keep the ban on fox hunting, elephants, dolphins, a range of different species that have issues, everything from Taji Cove slaughter to, like, say, the badger cull here in the UK. And that's me. So that's my blog, my Twitter, and I'm just very active on there. And that's sort of how I see my contribution to this wider topic.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Beth Jennings.
Can use this. We haven't got slides, but Beth's going to tell you more about her campaign.
Thank you. So as Dom mentioned, my name's Beth. I'm 24 years old and I run a campaign called Claws Out, which comes under the umbrella of the International Aid for the Protection and Welfare of Animals. I've been working in animal welfare for just over 3 years now, between Dogs Trust and Dogs Trust Worldwide, and most recently full-time as the campaign manager. So my story starts when I was 8 years old, and I was so fortunate to go on safari in Africa, and I absolutely fell in love with the African lion, like everybody does. So at the age of 21, I thought I would do something good, and I wanted to go and spend some time working on conservation. Unfortunately, as was touched on, there's a lot of volunteer opportunities in South Africa that aren't ethical, and I fell into that trap. So I volunteered for just over 2 weeks with lion cubs that I was told were going to be released into the wild. It was sold to me by a UK travel agency as completely ethical, all completely A-OK, and was good to go. So as a well-meaning volunteer, I joined other volunteers out there, bottle feeding cubs, washing these cubs, walking with the lions and the tourists, supposedly so they could be released into the wild. I soon learned that the reality of the trip, and that hundreds of other volunteers fall for, I was actually raising lion cubs in readiness for canned hunting and to be sold for lion bone. It's a huge, huge industry in South Africa, and the visitors all seem completely unaware of what they're doing, and I was one of those. It's so easy to fall for that trap. So what I do is I campaign and raise awareness, and we're launching an education campaign soon to try and reach the young audiences and the groups of tourists that are actually going to these parks and doing what I did. So I began Claws Out in 2015, and it was just an online blog to share my experience. The number of volunteers that actually speak out about it are really low, because I think awareness is still quite low generally. So the blog kind of escalated, and we were featured in magazines and newspapers, and we had some radio interviews, and the interest was huge. You know, as a volunteer that had been there myself, it's so different to charities telling you that what you've done is wrong. So I try and do it from an understanding point of view and say, I've been there and I made that mistake, and to teach others how they can learn from my mistakes. So in the 1940s, there were around 200,000 wild lions in Africa, and today there are no more than 20,000 lions. However, in South Africa alone, there are 6,000 lions in captivity, and that's estimated, and often people think that's actually less than there are. So these lions can never be released to the wild because they've been habituated to humans. So there's only one place that they can go, and that's into canned hunting. So canned hunting, if anyone doesn't know, is when they're in a fenced enclosure and they can't escape from the hunter. And the thousands of lions that are coming out of South Africa a year are also being sold into the lion bone trade, which is ever increasing. And the South African government has issued a quota for next year of 1,500 lion skeletons for use in traditional medicines in Asia. This is creating a huge problem for wild lions across the world, because it's sending the message that actually traditional Chinese medicine is okay, and it's a real thing that the South African government are supporting. So in doing so, you're creating such a demand for these bones that don't do anything in reality, that poaching of wild lions is on the increase. So I was asked to join this panel as a young conservationist and share my story for what I think the future of conservation looks like. And I think education is completely key. Whether that's from my part, educating young people and tourists as to what they're doing and why they shouldn't ever handle lion cubs or any other big cats across the world, or any other animals, it seems, across the world, to also contacting tour operators that are still selling the trips and travel agencies that are still selling the trips. They're usually targeted, the volunteering trips, at gap year agencies. So we spend a lot of time in universities speaking to students and in colleges that are about to embark on their gap years, to tell them not to handle big cats and to actually give them options for ethical trips. So I think that all too often conservation is viewed, especially by a younger audience, as something that someone else is doing overseas, and it actually can start with what we're doing here in the UK, even if South Africa is a million miles away and it might not seem like it has any impact. But for me personally, my love was sparked when I was 8 years old and I saw my first wild lion in Kenya. And for me, the thought of other children and next generations to come not having that privilege and not having the chance to see a real wild lion and not knowing that it's not going to be there in years to come is just absolutely devastating for me. So that's why I started my campaign, and that's why now I work full-time as a campaign manager.
Thank you very much, Beth.
Now we're going to hear from James Miller. James, you need to send out the slides coming. Have we got the... Do you want to take this? Sorry.
Sure.
You can use it. You can stand up, James.
You can speak into that.
Thanks.
You can see.
I've got a few slides, so let me know if I'm overrunning.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name's James Miller. I'm 16 and I'm an aspiring nature presenter. What I do is I make short documentaries on usually British wildlife, and I share them on social media, and I'm trying through these videos to raise awareness for the threats that British wildlife faces, and also just to showcase the beauty of the natural world, because there aren't enough people my age who appreciate it and who are interested in it. So yeah, that's what I do, but unfortunately I don't always have time to go out and get the footage that I want or plan these documentaries and edit them. So sometimes I do a bit of blogging as well, and yeah, I post pretty similar content on the blog to those I do in the videos. It can be anything from a tiny jumping spider I find in the back garden, right up to an article on why I disagree with the badger cull. So yeah, I also do a bit of photography and art in my spare time just because I enjoy it really. And yeah, with all of these broadcasts, what I try to do is promote them as widely as possible on social media, and particularly through my friend groups, because not only am I hoping to inspire people to take an interest in nature, but I see one of the main blocks to people getting into conservation at our age is that they're worried about being excluded, about being teased or bullied, and it does happen a lot. And I'm hoping that if enough of us reach enough phone screens across the country, this might start to become a bit more normalised, and even if we go about it the right way, a cool thing to do, because that's not how it's seen at the moment. But I think it is manageable if we go about it the right way. And this is actually something I'm working with the RSPB with a bit. I'm a member of this group called the Phoenix Forum, which is a group of 10 teenagers across the country who meet up 4 times a year, and we're elected to represent the RSPB's youth sector. And one of the things that we've been working on recently is looking at their youth strategy and how they retain all of those members who drop their membership during their teenage years, which is a huge number of people. And yes, that's been really interesting, and we did a lot of that this year. And another opportunity I had through them, I had the fantastic opportunity to visit number 10 Downing Street and talk to Sir John Randall, the Environment Advisor. And that was a really, really amazing opportunity, and it was a really encouraging meeting actually, because he clearly cares a lot about wildlife. He's been a bird tour operator. He was here at the Bird Fair on Friday actually. I think the only limit is his influence. One man alone doesn't make all of these decisions, and we need more people like him in the government. Yeah. And yeah, I thought I'd end with a pretty picture. Other than that, yes, I do a bit of stuff, like here at the Bird Fair. I sometimes help out on the RSPB stand, digging into owl pellets or chasing around insects with nets, and giving talks like these. So thank you very much for having me, and yeah, I look forward to hearing what the other speakers have to say.
The next speaker is Bella. Bella, here's your microphone, and here's your device to move your slides on. Just there. I think they're just coming up. So you can sit down, Bella, or stand up if you're happy to sit down.
Hello, I'm Bella Lack, and I'm a youth ambassador for the Born Free Foundation, and more recently Pocket Pals. My love of animals began at a really young age, and I was one of those children who was always fascinated with the little creepy crawlies in my garden, and I would bring in snails and watch them fascination as they crawled across my kitchen table, and I'd leave little piles of sugar around the house to attract the ants. As you can imagine, this never went down very well with my parents. Yet I know that it was this youthful exploration and freedom to discover that really nurtured my love of wildlife. And that's why I really believe in allowing children to re-establish their links with nature and just letting them be out in wild spaces and enjoying nature and wildlife in general. So we'll only protect what we care about, and we'll only care about what we know. And we're in a really critical condition at the moment. My generation could possibly bring children into a world that is devoid of everything that makes life so spectacular for me, and I'm sure for all of you. I've always been puzzled as to why, when it's so clear that nature and biodiversity are such an integral part of us, why do we treat them with such disregard? The rate of extinction is 1,000 times higher than it should be. Yet statistics will never really do justice to the magnitude of our crisis. So I have never seen a hedgehog, and I know that lots of people my age never have as well. And they used to be one of our most beloved and iconic species, and they used to number 30 million in Britain, and now we're in such a critical condition that so many people my age haven't seen one. But I think the worst thing is when I see in my generation a hopelessness about the state of nature, and also just a general disinterest. But all is not lost, because when I started utilising social media as a platform to project these issues, I unearthed a community of young people already doing just that, such as everyone on this panel with me. And I have found power in words as I have blogged, and I've also written articles for The Ecologist. And I also, through social media, I connect with other young people my age and we discuss issues and campaigns. And I think that's a really powerful thing, that ease to contact other people my age. My passion for protecting wildlife and animals in general was recognised last year when I was asked to be a youth ambassador for the Born Free Foundation. Through this network, I have met so many amazing people who are working on the front lines of conservation. But my eyes have also been open to many terrible practices going on around the world. And one of these is Pajran, which literally means to crush the spirit of an elephant. So a few weeks ago I travelled around Thailand to highlight this barbaric tradition, and the footage I took will be used for a short BBC Three documentary to project these issues to a wider audience. This photo is a 6-month-old calf called San Lao and his mother, who he found at one of the camps. They were in a tiny pen, and their movement was really restricted. They were both displaying severe signs of stress and anxiety, and it was terrible to see so many people coming from my country over there and unaware of what had to go into their amusement, and to see the elephants like this was terrible. But then I remember back to a few months ago when my Twitter account was suspended on the premise that I was too young, although the required age is 13. And when this happened, I had an outpouring of support from the conservation community. And I think this shows you that a few individuals, determined individuals, Twitter reinstated my account, and I think that this shows you a few determined individuals can get something back, that whether that be retrieving an account or a species. Because when I had this support, we contacted Twitter, and Twitter have over 55 million followers, I think, yet they decided to reinstate the account of a teenager who likes to protect animals, which really amazed and amused me, actually. We are no longer able to sit back and wait for others to solve these problems. We have lost 50% of our wildlife on Earth in the last 40 years, but that 50% that's left is still worth protecting, and I know that everyone else on this panel will agree with me when I say that. And that's exactly what I hope to do with the rest of my life, and I hope that you will join me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bella. Alex, over to you. Your slides are coming.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Alex White and I'm a 15-year-old wildlife photographer and blogger from Oxfordshire. I began my interest in wildlife photography at a young age. So I started blogging at the age of 9 when it was May half term and I was bored. So my mum very kindly gave me the idea to start taking photos and then post them on the blog. So thank you to my mum who basically started this. So my main interests in British wildlife, and those interests involve badgers, hares and foxes. I'm extremely passionate about getting more young people outside and interested in the local patch. I've been very lucky to have the opportunity to combine my wildlife photography together with passion for British wildlife to write a book called Get Your Boots On. Here's the title and the front cover for the planning. So the aim of the book will be to get more people outside, so it'll be written from me, which is a teenager, and it'll be aimed at around teenage years as well, and hopefully more and younger. So I also use my blog to highlight issues affecting my local patch. Young people today are faced with a future that will, in an environmental sense, be challenging, but also believe it will be full of opportunities. We need to balance ecology and economy, and we need to look at population, climate change, plastic pollution, extinction, and human impact to sustainability. Our relationship with the natural world is an important one. The young people today need connection with wildlife more than ever. We, as young people, need to get involved. We already rely on nature to create the air we breathe, the food we eat, and to provide materials that we need to live. Now we need a sustainable future for nature as well as us. Nobody likes to be told what they have to do or what they can't do. So what I plan to do with my wildlife photography and through this book and everything that I do for wildlife is to offer changes so that we can live better and alongside with wildlife, so that we save millions of species and we also look after ourselves and live alongside wildlife. So we need to embrace human activities better, which will be better for the environment. So we need to work in harmony with nature. And the challenge for that is that most people don't know what is going on, and we need to make people aware. So like through all of our blogs and everything that happens at Bird Fair, we can make people aware about what's going on, and such as ivory and badger cull and everything, so the tigers and lions and everything. So we just need to make people aware. So I'm going to leave you with this one question, and that is, how do we collaborate across so many countries and cultures to make humans sustainable? Thank you.
Thank you.
Last but definitely not least, I'm now going to hand over to Georgia, who again is probably one of our most well-known young wildlife campaigners.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So, we had a similar sort of setup to this last autumn at the Badger Trust conference. So again, it's great, it's brilliant to have that again. And obviously they've had similar events and similar type of things over the Bird Fair weekend. This is my probably like 5th or 6th that they're doing. So yeah, it's obviously important to make sure that they're following the work and that's being done on social media and across all of these channels. And like so many others, it's that aim, which is to sort of be sharing and to get their opinions sort of out into the work, out through social media and so on, sort of whatever way possible, whether that's through obviously seeing on blogs, online, on the streets, speaking to people, anything along those lines. And obviously we probably all agree that this is what needs to be listened to more than anything, with such incredible importance. Obviously, as we've seen very well, sort of with the power of social media, this can be done very well, and that's changed things a lot in the last few years with the improvements with this. Away from sort of school peers and everything who were, let's say, sort of less interested, uninterested, and it was sort of like, and it was supported my first draws into wanting to be getting involved with sort of campaigning and conservation. I remember the first sort of spike to this was through as it, what my passion is. One of my passions is badger. So going down when I was very young, going down to the local set, watching those, filming those, which I still do now, and I still do. It's just that I could never ever sort of get bored or sort of stop doing. And it was one of the times I went down about 5 years ago, and I'd noticed sort of a bit of disturbance and everything, which, well, it was quite a lot of disturbance, and my knowledge at the time lacked in wildlife crime, but I thought, oh, this can't be right. Contacted the local badger group, which I didn't and sort of bringing that in with the conservation and natural history onto the curriculum. Anybody think, I suppose, that they're not interested, but as soon as I go into schools, I do quite a few sort of local school visits and sort of programmes and workshops and so on, and you just get the totally different impression, with eyes lighting up and just absolutely just thrilled, loving every moment of it all, and sort of a mixture of emotions from just being really, really excited or sort of terrified of things, and sort of just all about learning and just getting that connection. And that's something that I'm very sort of keen on this education front, and I've sort of promoted and get involved with a lot regularly. And one of the things which I've sort of been working on at the moment and been involved with, following a trip following something I did last autumn, as a project working on engaging with young people, was a trip looking at a example of how education is being rolled out to fight for conservation issue in Cyprus. So those not aware, the illegal killing, slaughter of migratory birds on the island, this sort of thousands, millions of birds being killed each year whilst on their sort of migratory paths. And you can find out more here on the bird life and the CAB stalls with BirdLife Cyprus and the Committee Against Bird Slaughter. Anyway, so BirdLife Cyprus are a big campaigning group on the island that have sort of been going into schools. It's still a very traditional thing, and it's sort of going into classrooms and everything. And situation as we are today. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Well, I don't know about you, but that's one of the most impressive panels I've sat on, and I've been on panels with prime ministers and presidents and business leaders and many others who feel they're terribly important, but they have really impressed me. So just give you a big round of applause. It does give me hope for the future when I listen to the passion, the articulate nature of the discussion and debate. You know, often when you speak to people who take decisions in life, including senior politicians, they haven't got half a clue compared to these people. So I think it is so important that the younger generation speak out. It's so important that they campaign. It's so important their voice
and how they might differ for young people as opposed to grown-ups?
Thanks. I think that is a big part of trying to encourage and engage young people, because I think it can be scary to be bombarded with all these ideas of we're going to lose all the elephants, we're going to lose all the lions, this is a disaster. So kind of giving children something hands-on that they can do is a big part of obviously what I do in my job. And those kind of things that I try and talk to children about are simple changes. Their parents are buying, what it is they're having in their sandwiches, what it is they're washing their hair with, and that kind of stuff, and looking to see if it has palm oil in. So things like that. Just general, Racing Extinction was a really big project that was about that. And I don't know if anyone here saw the Racing Extinction documentary, but it was trying to encourage start with one thing was the hashtag campaign for that. And that was encouraging people to think about, to make one pledge of something they're going to do differently to help the environment after seeing the documentary. And one of the things that they suggested there was meat-free Mondays, because that feels like, it's quite scary to say to children, go vegetarian or something like that. But say then try meat-free Mondays, and a lot of kids got on board with that. Various pledges we had, changing for using more sustainable packaging and things like that. Just really simple, start with one thing, easy changes children can make. And like I say, they often inspire their parents, and then suddenly you've got the whole family doing a meat-free Monday. Or you've got the whole family swapping out what the shampoo is that they buy and that kind of thing. So I think they really are small, achievable things that everyone can do.
Thank you very much. Can I ask, Bella, you're obviously producing your programme about elephants for BBC Three, which is for a young audience. Do you think because you're young, because you're passionate, because you've gone out there, that's going to have a bigger impact on young people that you're reaching out to through that television programme?
Yeah, I think that's really important to have young people kind of influencing other young people, because sometimes I know from speaking to my friends and also just from personal experience, when you see these massive issues and the critical condition that we are in, sometimes you feel an overwhelming sense of hopelessness. But when you see that it is possible, even when you're younger, to do something about it and to go out and try and make a difference, I think that's really important. And also sometimes it's easier to relate to other people your age, so that's another reason why it's important to get young people involved and starting that conversation.
Alex, I'm going to pass this to you because you're obviously writing a book aimed at young people. Now, I speak to young people quite a bit and they don't often read books these days, so are you hopeful they will read your book because of who you are and the way you've written it? It's your story.
So, yeah, my book was based off an idea of Sam Stern, who's a young cook, and he made a similar book, and it was from his perspective on cooking and how some people find hopefully then that inspires them hopefully from a young age, because then that will work well for everyone.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions? We've got one coming up the back, please.
Hi, thank you for your stories, they're really inspirational. Just wanted to ask, how would you make conservation cool in school? I've got 2 children in secondary education and it's not something that you talk about. So what would you do? What advice would you give?
experience, I think that people our age will find doing more of the protesting against bad things, like everyone on this panel has been doing, taking a stand for wildlife. I think they consider that more of a cool thing than going out and badger watching. There's nothing wrong with that. We all do it. But yeah, I think that's the way to get through to them.
Can I bring Beth in on that? Because campaigning and sort of being cool campaigning, there is a certain element of connection with young people. Are you finding that through some of what you're doing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as mentioned, I think
bring it back down to just base level, and we think about talking about how kids and young people aren't connected with nature, but then we think it's sort of like that age bracket up to, I don't know, like 12, 13. Obviously we've got that older up to sort of university age, sort of 18, 19 sort of age, and obviously there's that gap there. I think it's been spoken about a lot recently and campaigned obviously with bringing more into the curriculum, GCSE and sort of natural history and everything, so yeah, I think that's a really good sort of starting point. Obviously we spoke about the sort of the influence of social media and everything, and also we touched lightly about careers and volunteering. I think if it's in at that sort of age, you're spoken to about at school about sort of career ideas and everything, talking
what we've done and our generation, and you mentioned the biodiversity loss and what's happening, and our generation hasn't solved it. Does your generation have a new way of doing things that you think is going to work instead?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. You're the most articulate young person I've come across in a long time, so I'm going to give you the first opportunity. If I asked you what was wrong with conservation today in terms of big NGOs, you're all familiar with, what would you say that needed to change?
I think in my generation there's been a rise in the independent activists. So I know lots of my friends, they go out and they go to campaigns and marches and protest against things that they feel they need to change. And I think that's a really positive step forward, because the power is with the people. And the big organisations and NGOs are really important for creating the ideas and initiating change, but after all, the actual change is only going to be with the people, and that's why it's really important that there are independent
was thinking of this as my exclusive right to be at this march, or my exclusive right to be at this event, and a competition between different organisations, competition between people, ego, that kind of thing. The good thing is that we have with social media and the things that all us are doing is it's a level playing field. We've all come from different places, from different parts of the country, from different parts of the world. There are people campaigning, and we all have a level playing field where we can all use our voice on social media, we make videos on YouTube, we can do whatever it is, we have the instant platform that perhaps didn't used to be there. And actually, I think we're being really hard on young people. I spend a lot of time talking to children who do read, who are interested in the environment, and who are always looking for ways to get involved. And part of obviously what I do with my job with National Geographic Kids is to tell them, yes, you can get involved. Perhaps I'm probably quite a bit older than some of the people on this panel. And when I was their age, it felt like a lot of closed doors. I remember hearing getting into this kind of job is really hard. You'll be really lucky if you get to do anything with conservation. And that isn't the case today. So today there's a lot more inclusion, there's a lot more support out there, there's a lot more organisations willing to support the fact that organisations like Born Free have youth ambassadors that didn't used to be a thing. I think we are moving forward by, yes, including people, including young people, including different age groups, collaborating together and giving a fair, open platform to all. So I feel
on the climate and on animal welfare, and also on how intensive agriculture is in this country, which is having a huge effect. So I think that's one thing that I'd tell people.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Georgia?
Okay, so I'd just say, as we all know very well, just how individuals, we've spoken about how we can have this impact, we can have this power between us, and we just need to be exercising that and just doing what we can through that in any way that is possible through these social media, through
everyone says, oh,